I good?
Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to Alara Court. My name is Alex Dongs, and we are here this afternoon for a press conference hosted by the Prime Minister of Barbados, the Honorable Mia Moore-Motley, and she is joined by members of government and other officials to brief the public on matters of national security. Following the presentations and remarks by the Prime Minister, we will turn over to the members of the media to field questions and responses. So without further ado, Prime Minister.
Thank you very much, Alex. I wanted to say Happy New Year to each and every one of you, but the last 24 hours have proven to be exceedingly challenging, and it is important that we speak to the country to be able to ensure that on the multiple fronts that we have been affected in the last 24 hours, that we keep everyone up to date and to let people know that things are under control with respect to the consequences that we are now currently facing. It is fair to say that what we saw happen last night in Venezuela is uncharted territory. It is also fair to say that what we saw happen in Barbados last night must also become a thing of the past, and to that extent the law enforcement officers have also met with me, so that I am here for dual reasons today and not just one, but any one of the two would have been sufficient to bring me to address the people of this nation. With respect to the first matter, with respect to Venezuela's and what is happening in Caracas and broader Venezuela, about just around 3 o'clock this morning, I was awoken, well, not even awoken because I really wasn't sleeping, and I saw that we were having difficulties, and from then was in contact with other colleague heads of government as well as the Secretary General of CARICOM. And we had an urgent heads meeting from which you would have seen a statement earlier today. That meeting took place just after 5 o'clock this morning. And at that stage, we recognized it was too early a stage for us to make any defining comment. That is still the position, because as we speak, matters are unfolding every half hour to an hour. You are as aware of the statements being made by different players, from the President of the United States of America to the Secretary of State to others, just as we are. But where Barbados becomes affected is on a number of areas, and we would have said this previously, which is why we continue to assert that small states really can only survive in an international rules-based order. For us, we always said that conflict would have consequences. And many of you asked, what would those consequences be? What would they look like? Well, we're living them out today. With the actions taken in Venezuela, a number of disruptions took place, primarily with respect to our airspace, or planes coming from the US, I should say. There are 3 major areas in the region, Eastern and Southern Caribbean, and then one in Puerto Rico, 4 altogether in the Caribbean, that effectively manage the upper flight space. And Curacao remained closed until just now. Piarco never closed, but we were affected by all US registered flights. It is fair to say that there were 13 scheduled inbound flights that were canceled, all of them full. The exact numbers are being confirmed as we speak. JetBlue, Delta Airlines, United Airlines. We also were aware that KLM canceled their flight even though they were not coming from the US. And we are also aware that 3 TUI flights, as you know, Barbados does the home porting and the cruising, and every weekend people fly into Barbados to be able to take the cruise ship. 3 of the TUI planes were also canceled, but 2 Norse ones, which are also bringing people, were allowed to come in. To the best of my knowledge, I've been advised by the airport, Mr. Bourne is here, that the British Airways and the Virgin flights will be coming in, and the flights from Canada, Air Canada and WestJet, would also be coming in. For the most part, regional air travel continues to operate, even though there is a tenuous situation and people are watching it, because in some instances they may be affected by still the closure of San Juan. And we suspect, I believe the French have opened back their airspace too, so that everyone except San Juan has opened back up. The National Security Council of Barbados met just after 1 o'clock, and for the last 2 hours we took briefs on both situations from a range of persons, not just the law enforcement heads, but as you would appreciate, Barbados is probably the biggest hub closest to Venezuela in terms of tourism, and therefore in terms of air flights and in terms of hotel accommodation and cruise accommodation, we would inevitably be affected. We have spent the time trying to get, and are still doing so as we speak, trying to get more details. There was a Conviasa flight that was to be returning to Caracas today, and 73 persons have been affected by that and clearly are not in a position to return to Venezuela as we speak. The airport is dealing with them and trying to understand where exactly persons have been. At the same time, the acting Minister of Tourism has been able to meet with the Barbados Hotel and Tourism Association and identify what rooms are available on island. There is still a comfortable number, because remember, even though there are people who are to leave, the people who were to come in are not here as well, so we still benefit from that additional room. Clearly the Conviasa one is a different one, because those persons were just simply to go back to Venezuela, and there's no incoming flight at this point in time for them. We anticipate that this situation will remain fluid, but the mere fact that Curacao has reopened its airspace, as well as France, with the Department of Martinique and Guadeloupe being the primary ones here in the region, in Saint Martin, there will be a need for us to expect that, barring no new unforeseen circumstances in Venezuela, that hopefully we can get back to some level of stability as soon as possible. You would have heard me mention that it was not just the airlines that would be affected, but it is also the cruise passengers. Barbados actually has, I believe, 4 cruise ships in at the moment, with a 5th one that was actually due to come in this evening for maintenance and repairs, so that our difficulty at the port is going to be accommodating the berthing of all of them. Some will, I assume, have to also be accommodated outside of the immediate harbor, and therefore would have to rely on tenders. With respect to the Arvia, as I said, the TUI flights were cancelled, but the 2 flights were coming in. Normally that would take 7 flights, and we're still waiting to hear on the status of the other 2. That is approximately 2,000 passengers that would be affected there. In addition, the Seabourn Explorer additionally was affected, and the Ritz-Carlton Yacht Collection. The port capacity for overnight berthing has been reviewed, and at this point is deemed manageable in the short term. What we are hoping is that those flights that were cancelled may well be rescheduled in the near future, and those ships that were due to leave Barbados this evening will probably do so then, hopefully in the near future. But this is something that is a moving target, and that we will continue to keep everyone updated on. With respect to the well-being and welfare of those who may be stranded locally, I've put the Minister of Home Affairs on notice. We are awaiting information still from the airport with respect to any other persons who may be stranded. And obviously most people would make their own arrangements. But let us also be clear that there are some people who may not have the wherewithal or the capacity so to do, and that is where the Minister of Home Affairs and Immigration Department, as well working with the Barbados Defense Force and the Ministry of Tourism, that we can see where and how we will be affected. I am hopeful that those numbers will not be large, given the initial responses that we're seeing, but I would not be surprised if we have responsibility for some of them. At the same time, those who were due to come back into Barbados may well be affected. Some of our citizens have gone out. Some of them may have gone and had a good time for Christmas and may not have been able to take care of themselves for an extra night or 2 in a hotel, and therefore we are conscious of that. We have been in touch continuously with the Consul General at Miami, the Honorable Rudy Grant, as well as the Consul General in New York, Mr. Lorenzo here. The bottom line is that both of them are not seeing a major set of pressure at this point in time, but a lot depends on how the airlines accommodate persons who have to be rebooked, and it is really still too early for us to make a definitive statement on this. Suffice it to say, however, that we give families in Barbados the assurance that we are on top of helping with your families who may be stranded overseas, and similarly, those people, we have been known for who we are and how we treat people. Those who will be stranded here, we will ensure that to the best of our ability, without going overboard, that persons are kept comfortable with their basic needs. With respect to the Barbadian mission in Venezuela, I would have spoken to the ambassador about 3:30 this morning, Ambassador Aquinas Clark. Mercifully, the ambassador has a military background and therefore is not phased and is taken control and in charge. There is no evidence or any reports of any injuries to any Barbadians in Venezuela, and for that we are grateful. We will continue to stay engaged with them. As recent as 2 minutes ago, before I came into this press briefing, I would also have been speaking to him because we know the situation is continuing to be exceedingly fluid. With respect to any of those who are at the airport, the Minister of Foreign Affairs has been charged with responsibility that after this press briefing finishes, for him to go and meet and to ensure that anything that needs to be put in place from the Minister of Home Affairs and the Minister of Tourism will be put in place to accommodate those who are affected. And the Bridgetown Port and the Grantley Adams International Airport will remain on high alert given the circumstances that we face. We don't expect it, but if there is need for any of the interregional airlines to be able to have access to Grantley Adams International Airport in order to be able to manage their way through this process, we've already put those arrangements and sent those alerts out. Ms. Sherlin has already spoken to virtually every single regional airline for us in the last few hours. Let me come now to the vexatious and issue as to what transpired here in our own country last night. My information from the police was that 10 persons were injured in an event at the end of a cruise event that was held and took place on board the Dream Chaser 2 from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. I will allow the Commissioner of Police to speak to these issues because these are operational matters, but suffice it to say that this type of behavior is unacceptable and will not be tolerated in this country. And those who have been responsible for causing this type of behavior will face the full weight of the law. Suffice it to say that I'm happy, and there has been much legal back and forth about whether we should have a domestic terrorism bill. We will have one, because it is one thing for a person to be charged with murder. It is another thing for a person to create panic and to cause people to be the subject of terrorism and terror. And when you seek, as I've said before, to go into a gas station at 11 o'clock on a Sunday morning, or to shoot across a bus at 8 o'clock on a Saturday morning in Eagle Hall, or to shoot somebody at 4 o'clock on a Friday afternoon in St. Michael's Row, then we know that we have a problem that requires not just the simple application of charges of murder or aggravated assault or any of those things, but we are now into the area where people are seeking to cause terror to those that remain. I'm satisfied from the briefings from the police that this is a handful of people, but Barbados will not tolerate this behavior, however few or however many. And however much the head of the RSS is here, I've always said that I have no difficulty in calling in for reinforcements if I need to. At this stage, mercifully, the police and the Barbados Defense Force have collectively been doing a good job in catching, and your media will reflect the fact that in almost every instance when there has been a major If you are a murder, the police are catching the people. What we need to do is, as a nation, as I said in my New Year's message, to bind together. And to bind together to be able to ensure that no 100 or 150 or 200 people can put a nation of 267,000 at risk out of foolishness. The events of last night coming out of Venezuela show that we have enough challenges outside of Barbados. The events that happened with the death of a man in Charles Row Bridge a few weeks ago show that we have enough challenges from nature, enough challenges from geopolitical tensions, enough challenges in terms of mental health from social media and AI platforms that are causing people to do foolishness. For us now to tolerate things that we as a nation, as families, and as communities can get on top of. No gun walks, no gun talks. And Barbadians, I'm asking you to bind together to make sure that this country does not go the route of others by becoming a place where terror becomes the order of the day and persons become frightened just for basic things that they should be able to do in fairness and in safety. So at this stage, I would just simply say, and I think there was one other matter, sir, before I pass to the Commissioner to deal with it, and that is that there was a notion that the accident and emergency has been locked down. The Minister of Health and the Minister has assured me that that lockdown was removed. It was done as an act of precaution to be able to deal with the many things. There were 10 persons who were affected. I think 5 were admitted, of which 3 went to surgery. 2 others were admitted. 1 was discharged by the doctors. 2 self-discharged themselves. And there was 1 further test to be done for another one who is to be also admitted. Okay? And the 10th person is also being admitted too now. Okay? With respect to the situation in the medical facilities, 87 people went to Winston Scott Polyclinic because a decision was taken by the Ministry of Health and the Queen Elizabeth Hospital to stand up fully the Winston Scott Polyclinic given the incident. To this date, I'm told that 51 people have been seen thus far. I should say that 87 isn't only referrals from QEH, but as it happens in the normal course of things, some people go directly to Winston Scott Polyclinic because it was intended to be a clinic that takes some pressure off of A&E, so that there is no longer any lockdown on A&E, and mercifully we are in a position to be able to deal with normal business with respect to persons who may need the hospital services. I want to thank all who have been involved, from the police to the medical staff at all levels, and all other persons working in the hospital that have helped us to manage this very difficult situation. I simply say to you, that is why we've been passing the types of legislation that we pass. And in the words of our president, there shall be no retreat and no surrender, because this will not bring this nation to its knees. By the same token, it may mean continued difficult decisions and continued calls and entreaties to bind together as one people, as a nation. So at this point, I'll pass over to the Commissioner of Police, who can speak to you, and then we'll open up for any questions. I don't think there's anything we've left out from the initial briefings, but suffice it to say that the National Security Council will remain in a posture, recognizing that most of what we have to do really are the consequences of the fallout of conflict in the Eastern and Southern Caribbean, which is what we have said all along. Conflict will lead to trouble, and this is the example of the kind of trouble. And as I said, because we are the major logistics hub with respect to tourists and people visiting, this is the one that has been affected with our exposure to the U.S. and to some other U.S. registered planes outside of the U.S., and by extension, as we saw, with some of the European ones. Thank you.
Thank you, okay. Prime Minister. And good evening, everyone. I want to update the country on this unfortunate incident which occurred this morning around 3 a.m. And for us in the Barbados Police Service, and no doubt in the external environment that is the country, we want to assure each and every member of the public that we in the Barbados Police Service have been on this incident, this unfortunate incident, just after 3 a.m. And I will say that up to this minute, our officers are still in the field carrying out investigations. This has been a very untimely incident for us. Things that we work day in and night to bring under control. We will not resile from what has occurred because it is our focus to bring the situation under control. I want to assure the country and bring some level of good mindset to them, if I put it that way, that you should have no fear. I have tremendous confidence in the officers who have been assigned to investigate this matter. As members of the Major Crime Unit and also members of the Serious Organized Crime Unit who have been tasked to investigate this matter. I want to call on members of the public to assist us and any information that they may have that can deal with this situation, this serious incident, to let us have that information coming into us. You can call us at police number 430-7189 or Crime Stoppers at 1-800-8477. So we will depend on members of the public to partner with us in this unfortunate incident. We will update the country in the near future. We want to walk you through this process and make sure everyone is safe and sound going forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. And as I said, I hope everybody and all Barbadians who are right-thinking take this as a serious call for us to bind together as a nation. At this point, we will open up for any questions from the media. Yes, please. Just wait for the mic so that your voice is carried. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Madam PM. Just a few questions from me quickly. I know you said it's still early days as it relates to a CARICOM position and statement. However, I am with hearing terms such as a reboot of the Monroe Doctrine coming back to play with this attack on Venezuela. What is Barbados' position on the actual event itself?
Let me be very clear, Colville. Venezuela is our friend. The United States of America is our friend. In fact, in both instances, we have family relations with both countries. By the same token, the Caribbean community has been the entity that we have chosen as a matter of first principles to align our foreign policy with. When the heads of government met this morning, all of the persons were not there because it was an emergency early meeting. We took a decision that we will wait for other information to become present. And when that happens, we will certainly act collectively, and I do not want in any way to prejudice the integrity of that consultative process with CARICOM. Having said that, I've been very clear that our principles are very, very clear, and that small states, and by small I don't only mean as small as Barbados, but much larger than Barbados, but still considered small. Small states can only survive in an international rules-based order. And that, therefore, anything that happens that runs contrary to that would be of grave concern to us as a people in Barbados, but equally as to the region. So without prejudice, I will await any further consultations on the specifics of this incident, but I just share with you the principles that mean a lot to us beyond the normal international law principles.
And a follow-up question, Madam PM. You mentioned that basically no further escalation within Venezuela, the short-term impacts should likely pass quickly. What are the permutations as it relates to the potential long-term impacts on our tourism?
Colville, we simply don't know. For me to speculate and to conjecture anything now would be just simply that, conjecture. Can't do it. I ask you to allow the events of the next few days to play out. There are perspectives as to what has transpired in Venezuela that I suspect will continue to play out in the next few days. So I do not think that we are in a position to offer any meaningful commentary at this stage. What I can say is that we are dealing with the consequences of the conflict. and the consequences of the conflict have been exceedingly disruptive to both of our ports of entry, the Grantley Adams International Airport and the Bridgetown Port. And to that extent, there are human realities because those disruptions have meant that people have been affected, and not only wealthy people visit our nation, so that there are some people who will not be able to take care of themselves in the circumstances. We're trying to get to the bottom of it, and between the rooms that remain from the BHTA as well as contingency plans that we have for other facilities, not just for today, but as you correctly said, should something happen again. President Trump did say that there may well be a second strike. We don't know. By the same token, we are hoping and praying that there will be a de-escalation of any such conflict, because, as I have said over and over, escalation and war, of conflict and war, does not serve anyone's interest. And Barbados has always held the position that where there can be dialogue, where there can be conversation, let us have it, and let us see where we can find a common place. The truth is that that is why the UN system also exists, and I fully anticipate that they too will have to have a ventilation of these issues. But at the same time, irrespective of wherever you started in this argument, and the perspective as to who was right and who was wrong and who is not right, let us end up today at 4 o'clock saying we pray for no further escalation. In fact, we pray for de-escalation and we pray for dialogue. Persons will feel justified in a show of force. Persons will feel justified that they are acting in accordance with their law. Others will argue that it is a complete breach of international law. Whatever it is, as of 4 o'clock this afternoon, we are saying, let us continue to call and pray for de-escalation and for the absence of conflict, because we are now facing firsthand how conflict can affect not just lives, but livelihoods in the southern and eastern Caribbean. And Barbados, to that extent, while we are not the closest to Venezuela, Guyana and Trinidad and Tobago are. Grenada and St. Vincent and Barbados are the next line of countries after Guyana and Trinidad and Tobago. But among those 5, Barbados probably has the biggest logistics hub for tourism. So you now begin to understand why I speak and why I have been speaking in the terms that I have, without necessarily getting in to matters that are too high for us.
Final question from me to the Commissioner before I pass to my colleagues. Commissioner, you would have outlined in several other addresses to the nation and press conferences several measures from monitoring, preventative measures, that is. No one can question the arrest record aspect. But from preventative aspect, you have outlined several measures and outlined also several seizures, ammunitions. What would you say to Barbadians at this point, evidenced by what happened this morning, who would be questioning the success of these measures that have been implemented by the police service thus far? Whether they have borne any fruit, borne real fruit?
I guess what I would say up front is that the records speak for themselves in terms of our successes over the period that I have been speaking to the country. And a one-off incident this morning will not delete that excellent work which we have done over time. That for us, what happened this morning for us, we can say it was a revengeful act. 2 parties against each other, long-standing dispute, and they lie in wait on persons who are disembarking a vessel and took shots at them. So it is not something happenstance. It is well planned and organized. And that is why we put our ace detectives to deal with it and bring those perpetrators to justice at the soonest. So I have confidence in my people going forward, I must say.
Commissioners also be very modest. In many instances, we do not talk about the things that have been averted or avoided in this nation. And I can tell you over the course of the last few years, many, many, many incidents that have been avoided and averted, and I want to thank the police for that. I can understand that he will not want to go into operational details, but suffice it to say that as recent as over this Christmas season also, we would have been able to avoid and avert further difficulties. Okay? Any other questions?
Prime Minister Ricardo Rose from Starcom Network. I know this situation could have an impact on oil prices, and I heard the president saying he's going to send U.S. companies into Venezuela to fix Venezuela's infrastructure. I'm just wondering what impact do you expect this will have on, I guess, the global energy? Will it impact Barbados's energy as well, and the country's market stability, basically?
I think it is still too early for us to talk. A lot depends on what are the governance arrangements put in place for Venezuela. By the same token, I know that the Vice President, I think, addressed the country a little while ago. By the same token, we've heard President Trump say that they intend to run Venezuela. I think all of us know that we need to give this time and to see what in fact is going to happen. The markets will also clearly respond on Monday. Suffice it to say that we are praying, obviously, that there is no immediate increase in oil prices, because that has another negative effect for all of us in this country. And that is why, you know, sometimes when I've been saying over and over that we live in exceedingly challenging times and that we have to put down money for a rainy day, and that there are certain things that we have to do because nobody owes Barbados a living. And even on this economic diversification bill, if we don't compete to be able to have people to come here to provide jobs and to do the different things, we will suffer. So suffice it to say that we are fully on alert with respect to our economic circumstances, with respect to our national security circumstances, with respect to the management of our tourism product and our two border entities, well, there are really three, Port St. Charles, Bridgetown Port, and of course the Grantley Adams International Airport. And we are standing up all of the entities that are needed to be able to fight these battles. And that's why I believe that if we don't have to deal with what we are dealing with from last night with fellas coming off of a cruise, it allows the nation to be able to fully focus on matters that really are beyond our control, but we have to treat to them because we live on planet Earth, whether nature or natural or geopolitical or technological. But when we have to stop now and deal with these other kinds of things, it diffuses the energy that we have. But it is really too early, in summary, for us to make a determination on what is likely to happen with respect to the oil prices, because the market may take the view that this portends well for the supply of oil. Remember that the U.S., a lot of the U.S. refineries are in fact built for the heavy crude of Venezuela. So we need to know that. And if they're in fact going to reach an arrangement, there may well then not be a deleterious impact on the market cost. By the same token, if the governance arrangements are such that they're unlikely to have any calm returned in the immediate future, then all numbers all things will play, and you may see some spikes. So let's wait and see what happens on Monday from the markets and how the markets interpret it.
I've also heard several countries calling for the UN Emergency Council
Security
to intervene.
Council.
Yeah, Security Council to intervene. Do you support those calls, Prime Minister?
I've always said that where mature conversation can take place, it should take place. I am conscious that the United States has a view that they feel strongly about with respect to the impact on their citizens of the narco-trafficking war. As to whether this is the way to deal with it or not is capable of debate, for sure. At the same time, there are those who believe that this is, in fact, a blatant breach of the articles of the UN Charter. And to that extent, the one place that we should be having conversations, even if we accept the events of last night, Our eyes are in the front of our head, not the back of our head. And therefore, the time for mature conversation is this evening and tomorrow. Quite frankly, I would have expected that the Security Council should have been meeting already to be able to ensure that there are at least guardrails put in place, even as we speak now, to ensure that there is no potential for this precedent to be abused in the future by other countries.
So does the UN, so does the Monroe Doctrine that he mentioned override the UN Charter?
Well, you have a lot of work to do to educate our public.
Final question, Prime Minister. In case there is any mass exodus of Venezuelans out of the country, what kind of diplomatic support Barbados is prepared to give in that regard, basically?
I'm not going to speculate on anything in public, and I just want to give you the assurance. You know this government, and you know this leadership, and you know that we will do the right things for the right reasons. What I'm not going to do is to speculate and to give news stories for the sake of it or to fill copy, because we are at a peculiarly dangerous moment in the world's affairs. You know, in 2018, when I first addressed the United Nations, I said then that this world looks too much like it did 100 years ago. Regrettably, I have come to rue the day that I made that comment. And we have gone from crisis to crisis to crisis, from pandemic to cost of living crisis to supply disruption crises to the question of the geopolitical disruptions that we're seeing now, to the whole issue of, as I said, the continuing climate crisis. I mean, in the last 7 years, we had what? A freak storm, a ashfall, and one hurricane, Elsa, one storm surge that decimated the fishing industry, and then another freak storm that took a life here a few weeks ago. I do not know of any other similar time in my 60 years in this country where we have lurched from crisis to crisis to crisis to crisis. And that is why I say that sometimes if I am a little intolerant of those who want to play off the silly season as the place in which the playground should be, forgive me for not joining you on that playground, because I am now too consumed, and this government is too consumed with matters that even with every single ounce of energy, every single Barbadian, every single political party, we still do not have enough to fight through this. And I am now having to see how best we can perfect the art of walking in between the raindrops. So a little bit of trust is needed now, and a little bit of patience is needed, and that is where the maturity to leadership comes in, because rest assured, just as this morning at 3 o'clock I was up, just at 5 o'clock we dealt with the heads of government meeting, just as the National Security Council has met here for the last few hours, I'm conscious that there are things that we do not know and that we cannot predict at this point in time. But suffice it to say that we will be guided by first principles. We will be guided first by the protection of lives and livelihoods. We will be guided by the first principles that support Barbados's right and other small states' rights to be able to be protected in an international rules-based order. By the same token, we are not naive, and we understand that where large powers contend, large powers very often will want to show testicular fortitude. And that testicular fortitude may have negative impact and implications for small countries such as ours. Yep, that's it. I really want to thank everybody. You know, the ironic thing is that I may see some of you later, because even as we're doing all of this, I committed to the children of St. Michael Northeast and the children of St. Michael Central to give them their normal New Year's party. And in a funny way, I am even more driven to ensure that this country is safe because of those children. So I may see some of you there. Suffice it to say that we will continue to hope that we will do as best we can, and even where it is not perfect, we shall stay focused and operate, as I've indicated, protecting lives and livelihoods and our principles. Thank you very much.